Welcome to the Disruptive Innovation Festival, the online festival that asks the question, what if we can redesign everything? We've already had some great sessions going on yesterday, and at this moment, I want to invite Anna Simpson, who is innovation coach focusing on long-term thinking and is author of 2 books. Join this session to learn about the 5 elements that unlock innovation. Don't forget, this is an interactive session, so we want you to comment, ask questions. You can use the comment box underneath this video or tweet using hashtag ThinkDiff. And for now, I want to go hand this over to Anna. So Anna, can you tell me what was the first time that you start thinking about the culture that supports ideas?
Thanks so much, Kinga, and really glad to be online, and I hope you enjoy the session coming up. Also, particularly hope you do engage and that you ask lots of questions. So this first question, what first started me thinking about the importance of ideas and how really a culture can enable ideas to be shared, which is one of the key things to innovation. So I started out as a journalist, and I was asking how society is changing and what can help us move towards healthier societies. And one of the first magazines that I wrote for was an Indian magazine called Down to Earth. And my first story published was about the British Patent Office agreeing that Indian traditional knowledge should be recognised in patents for modern medicine. And this was the culmination of a 10-year battle before that, started by a company that wanted to use neem in its products, which has been used in Indian knowledge for thousands and thousands of years. And had the agreement not been passed by the British Patent Office, traditional Indian practitioners would not have been able to use this long knowledge without having to pay for it. So I think this is a really crucial point, that patents, and in some ways the way in which we talk about innovative ideas and the inventions that we create today, often don't recognise the complexity and the longevity of conversations that have enabled that idea to emerge or enabled that new product to emerge. And I see ideas a bit like, not like the progeny of one particular person, but more like teenagers who are living wild lives, who are interacting with lots of people, who are constantly sharing, and they have a really rich social life, and that's what helps them to be constantly evolving. And so today we're going to be exploring what sort of culture enables this vast, rich growth in ideas, and how can your organisation develop a culture like that? So to help you reflect, I'd encourage you, if you don't have with you now like a pen and paper, which is what I tend to use, or clay modelling, or Lego, or whatever it is that you like to use to doodle and reflect on, then please just grab it and make sure you've got that. Because during the talk, I'm going to be putting some ideas to you, and I'd love you to be taking notes. I'd love you to be sharing back at us the ideas you have, the reflections that these prompt for you, and then we'll have time to discuss them towards the end of the session. So this first question, what enables ideas to have a rich social life? This is something I started researching and working on while I was working full-time at Forum for the Future. So this is an organisation that works for social transformation. And we work with lots of companies who really get the need for full system-wide change and want to be part of making that happen. And even with such an idea of innovation in mind, so not merely product to product, sort of what's the next thing on the shelf, even with the notion that really they want to transform society around them, they struggled with innovation. And I mean, partly it's hard work. But I was wondering, what is it that can support ideas to emerge in an organisation? What is it that helps people to share them, support them to grow? Because some people at the time when I began writing this book were saying to me that organisations, like big organisations, can't innovate. All they can do is either invest in small startups or sell themselves, or leave it to someone else to innovate. They can't do this themselves. And I wasn't convinced, because ideas need people as much as people and organizations need ideas. They need to have us talking and sharing in order to grow themselves. Ovid, thousands of years ago, Roman poet, quipped that an idea is fragile. It can be killed by a sneer or a yawn. It can be stabbed to death by a quip, or worried to death by a frown on the wrong man's brow. And actually, Google found the same thing so many years later. It conducted over 200 interviews with over 180 teams, looking for what would make the perfect team, what would make the perfect group of people in which ideas can really be shared. And it found that actually who is on that team matters much less than how they interact with each other. And the crucial element that can enable ideas to be shared in a team is how safe people feel with each other. So that mattered more than anything, that they need to feel safe enough to take risks, safe enough to say the thing that might be sniffed at or might be sneered at, but in the knowledge that it probably wouldn't be. So today we're going to look for these particular cultural elements that will help you and help your organisation cultivate ideas. And I want you to work with me. I want you to think this through. And the first question I have for you is, when did you last hold back an idea that you'd have liked to share? When did you last swallow an idea? So we'll come back to this at the end of the session, and we'll also be asking what might have helped that you to express that idea, what would have helped that idea to emerge. So I'm going to show a couple of slides. They're just pictures as we go. And they're pictures to help inspire you and to help prompt your imagination. And they come with stories. And these are based around some of the essentials that I found during my research. If you give me just one moment. Sorry. Here we go. You can see that. And I trust King will pipe up if you can't. So the first story is borrowed, as many stories are, from a great storyteller and chef, Dan Barber. And Dan goes to a fish farm in southern Spain to discover the origins of the most delicious fish he has ever tasted. And on the tour, he has a tour of the fish farm by the owner, Miguel. And Miguel is going around pointing out all these rare birds and algae and phytoplankton. And then they come across a flock of flamingos. To which Dan says, surely the last thing you want on a fish farm is thousands of flamingos feeding on your fish. Actually, at this fish farm, this is Vita La Palma, and there are actually 600,000 birds a year on this farm, and over 250 species of them, which makes it the richest country in Europe. Miguel pauses at this point and says, no, it's not about the health of the fish just in themselves, it's about the health of the whole ecosystem. So he actually uses of the flamingos themselves, their pinkness, their vibrancy, to judge the health of the ecosystem. And it works like this, that the phytoplankton in the water are being eaten by the shrimp, and the flamingos are also eating the shrimp, excuse me. And he can tell by the colour that's sort of coming up through this ecosystem how healthy and how diverse that whole system is. So that's a really crucial point, that for ideas to emerge, we need healthy, rich, vast systems. Innovation thrives in a vast range of ideas, not necessarily in tightly structured, tightly contained environments. So you need, in an innovative company, not just the likely suspects of, say, the fish, but the unlikely suspects, even the predators, the flamingos. So my first question for you is, what's your organization's idea of a good fit? And which unlikely suspects would you add to the mix? That's our first story. And if you'd like to chime in with observations, please do. And if not, we'll definitely be coming to your thoughts towards the end of the session. So our next couple of stories. Organisations sometimes recognise the need for diversity and recruit specifically for it. And this is where we realise that diversity itself isn't enough. So this is the case of General Electric recruited Omar Ishraq on the left because he had a particular knowledge of the ultrasound business that they recognised that they were lacking and wanted to develop. They brought in Omar. And they said even, as they brought him in, that they were keen for him to disrupt and identify their sacred cows and challenge them. But this was Omar's experience, as he recounted in a book by Konati and Shogran. All these ideas that he had, he says, were probably correct, but he didn't know how to communicate them. And he realised that it was more than simply grasping just the lingo of GE. He had to grasp a systematic view as to how initiatives could be done. So through this process of bringing Omar into GE's existing culture and existing language, some of his diverse ways of thinking were lost. We all have a tendency, even if an organisation isn't asking us to conform itself, we all have a tendency to conform. And some of us find strategies that really help us to cope. Among them, David Bowie, who as a teenager was actually shy of performing. He'd rather been writing the musical himself, and he only really started performing because no one else was around to perform his musicals. And so he took on one of the characters and found that he liked going on stage as someone else. Being someone else, having the mask of someone else, actually enabled him to share parts of himself that were the true self, but could have been counter to people's expectations of him, or as those expectations lived on in his mind. So the next insight that I have about a culture that really enables ideas to be shared and organisations to innovate is that we need integrity. So the first is diversity. The second, people need to be able to share with integrity. And so I'd ask you to reflect on how your organisation asks people to conform, recognising that all organisations do this through dress, through structures and language, through jargon, and for very good reasons, sometimes for reasons such as quality and safety. But organisations ask people to conform. And what tools could you use to help you behave as you like? What persona could you adopt to help you behave as you'd like? So our third story, this is an artwork and it explores how patterns form in the natural world. It's created by an Italian artist, Tez, also known as Maurizio Martinucci. And he was inspired in this artwork by Norbert Wiener, who says, "We are but whirlpools in a river, not stuff that abides, but patterns that perpetuate." He was also inspired by Alan Turing's use of maths to explain how chemical patterns emerge in the natural world. Now, this artist teaches a course on bioart at Bangkok University, and I was asking him to explain how you go about teaching such complex art processes that really bring biology together with an exploration, together with artistic experience. And he said the first thing he ever does with his students is to build microscopes. And I asked him, why would you build a microscope? Surely you're teaching in a global university, they have microscopes. He explained it's not about the knowledge, but about how the students get the knowledge. And there's a real empowerment that goes on through building your own tools to acquire knowledge and through asking yourself, how do I want to go about acquiring the knowledge that I want to gain? Once they build the microscopes, Ted says they just go on these unstructured journeys of inquiry. Basically, they play. I asked him what play means, and he says play means no barriers in the way you want to explore, no rules. The more rules you have, the less you play, the less you can uncover. my question, the key insight here is about curiosity and how we learn, how we enable curiosity. How do people learn in your organisation? Often we have structured inquiries to pursue for the sake of specific goals, but what space is there to really to play and to explore? When we spot patterns, and this takes time. Often in organisations we're taken up by deliverables and outputs and targets, and we rarely have time just to go and sit and think. So this is the filmmaker Ingmar Bergman. He spent the last 25 years of his life apparently in solitude apart from his wife, living on the island of Faroe and really limiting his diet and limiting his activities. And he'd actually just go and sit and look at the sea and think through all his experiences and just think and think until, he says, the humanity would come oozing out of him. The ideas for his films would emerge. Another story that I've come across of an organisation that's really focused on innovation that encourages this sort of reflection day to day is the school Hyper Island, started in Stockholm, also in Manchester, also in Singapore, that asks its students to reflect very frequently on why are you here, what brought you here, how did you come to be here? There are rituals that can also help us connect with these simple questions. So all organisations have rituals, whether it's just checking your emails in the morning or a meeting or a lunch or a breakout session. But we can use rituals in our lives to help us cope with change and also to help us instigate change. Tarkovsky, another filmmaker, tells a story of a monk who instructs his protege just to go and water a barren tree every day for 3 years. Sounds like a pointless task, but after 3 years the tree blooms. This is fiction. But in another of his films, the character Eugenia asks what a particular ritual is for, and the answer she receives is anything you like. The idea is that a ritual in itself can help you create any of the change that you'd like. So I'd ask you to reflect. How did you come to be here today? This could help you reflect on your daily experience. And this is our last story. The woman you see is Didi Contractor. She was born in 1929. She's still working in the Himalayas, where she's been living since she got married as a young woman. The Himalayas is prone to earthquakes. And her focus really has been on sustainable construction there, so helping to preserve traditional Indian knowledge about building with mud in ways that many, many years. Mud has a particular quality of resilience in earthquakes, and to demonstrate this, Didi Contractor performed a test that she calls the sledgehammer test, and I call it the sledgehammer test of innovation. She built 3 walls. One of them was with hard bricks, and one was with sun-baked bricks, and one was with traditional mud bricks. The hard concrete bricks she hit with a sledgehammer and they shattered. The sun-baked, well, oven-baked bricks gave, but didn't really shatter, so they chipped, they fell over a bit. And the sun mud-baked bricks simply stood and swayed. And she explains that what enables these mud bricks to last under horrific stress is the surface tension between the bricks. So being soft, water is able to flow through the microscopic structures in the bricks, and this enables them to form strong bonds, so that rather than remaining as single bricks, they become really one strong wall. And as an analogy for a building, this is pretty good. So the stronger the brick doesn't necessarily mean the stronger the building. And for an organization, similarly, the stronger the person within the organization doesn't necessarily make for a stronger organization. It really is about the bonds that we form with each other. This takes us back to this idea of safety that we explored in the beginning. Google, with Google, so Google found through its research among many teams, found that safety is the key factor in enabling people to share ideas. And Amy Edmondson, who's a Harvard psychologist, identifies three, and was the first actually to coin this notion of psychological safety, identifies three factors that can really enable leaders to build safety in their organization. One is to frame their work as a learning problem, so not just as a task. Another is to acknowledge their own fallibility. And the third is to ask questions. So in contrast to a culture in which things are set and people have set opinions and put them forward and defend them, it's an inquiry process with the whole organization working together. So in this point on reflection, I'd like to ask you to think about how closely you listen to each other in your workplace. Admit that you don't necessarily know. At this point, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And hopefully come back to you. And ask you to share, if you can, with us, some of those stories that held you back from sharing, and some of the reflections that this has prompted for you on what would actually enable you to share with more freely within your organization. If you don't have stories immediately, another thing that I'd really encourage you to do is to draw or make these tools that can help you to share, and to share these with us later on Instagram. Use the hashtag ThinkDiff. My own alias is @_Anna Simpson, and we'd really just like to hear those stories, even in your own time. One question did flash up, and I'm afraid I missed it. Can you?
Yeah,
Jen?
I can jump in on this. I saw a question coming in from Jen. The question is, what would you define as a strong organization?
So a strong organization to me is one that's resilient. So we're living in times of complex, rapid change. You may have heard the term VUCA, so volatile, uncertain, ambiguous, or complex, ambiguous. Things are changing very fast. A strong organization, to me, is one that's able to endure that rapid change. It does so through being agile, becoming agile, being able to innovate. And the various ways, sorry, a moment, interruption. The various ways in which it's able to do that. Sorry, please just give me 1 minute. It's through establishing this sort of culture that enables it to innovate. But one thing that I'd say is, so I think I mentioned at the beginning briefly that I don't see an innovation-friendly organization simply as one that's turfing out product after product. It's one that's able to be agile in response to change. And so it's more like a listening organization, a sensing organization. I think of it a bit like an animal poised, sort of aware that something's about to happen. And I call this the still point of innovation. So if we've got in an organization the strength that is inherent in having strong bonds between people, having a clear sense of the purpose, knowing that we're able to share an idea, and that when an idea is shared, we're able to listen, we're able to take that on board and recalculate and rethink. That to me is a strong organization. It's a different sort of strength to an organization that's very set on a strategy. It's a much more sort of flowing idea of strength.
All right, and another question coming in is, what bonds or tools can you use to create that in practice?
So creating this in practice is, I think, a process, and it has to be a collaborative process. So there's no way in which you can simply go into an organisation and say, look, this is the culture you need. Everyone in that organisation needs to be involved. And I'd also see it as a process of experimentation and innovation itself. So for each of these things that I've mentioned, such as personas to help you speak with integrity. So that's a wild example, but we take it back a step. I was doing a workshop in Singapore with a group of young professionals there who had come across the problem of sharing with dissent. So they'd come across the problem of saying no, it's countercultural, they didn't feel comfortable doing it. And they found like strategies to help them sort of, well, they'd say yes, basically, and then have to deviate from that later. And they were uncomfortable with this and looking for a way to solve it. And one of the game sort of prototypes they came up with themselves was a mask that actually looked a bit like Hello Kitty. Hello Kitty sort of doesn't really have a mouth or a gender. And when they held this up in meetings, it was comic, it helped deflate the atmosphere, and it also helped them say the difficult things and take away from that the problem that they didn't want the difficult thing or the no to be associated with them. So they put the mask in the way in between the two. But I'd say for each organisation, it really has to be a process of trying to ask these questions. What is holding us back from sharing, and enabling people first to say what's holding them back, and then enabling people to experiment with what can help them get over it, just as I've tried to prompt you in this session.
Nice. Another question coming in. We have a question from Kevin, and he wonders if you could elaborate a bit more on the role of interdisciplinary collaboration,
and particularly interdisciplinary collaboration. Yeah, absolutely. This really comes back to the central premise of diversity, that for new ideas to emerge, we need diverse perspectives. And when we're collaborating, the more disciplines we can bring together to support that, the richer sort of, the more fields of ideas, fields of expertise, fields of knowledge we have to draw on. There are some really good examples of this, actually, as innovative processes. One that I look at in the book is MetroGIS, which is a form of sort of transport coordination that was started in Minnesota across different regions of Minnesota. And they brought together people from all the different sectors to collaborate to understand together what sort of solution they needed to their transport problems. Another example with Forum for the Future is the Protein Challenge. So this is really looking at what would be a sustainable future for the protein system, and involves bringing together many people from across that system. So both people working in dairy, people working in fish, people working in insect protein, people who really never thought of themselves as related to the protein system, in packaging, in distribution, retailers, chefs. And you bring all these people together because they all have a very different perspective on food and the future of food. And that enables us to identify through long conversations and processes of inquiry some of the sort of real obstacles we need to overcome, such as the amount of plant protein people are eating, and diversity in grain, and the health of soil. So I hope those couple of examples help. But if there was a specific aspect to that question that I didn't quite get, then please come back, because I'm not sure I answered it exactly as you wanted.
So Anna, because we're reaching the end of this session, I guess, I was just wondering, do you have some takeaways from the people that are listening on how they can adopt this way of thinking that you've just explained?
Yeah, particularly I'd encourage you to spend some time reflecting on your own personal stories and experience, because this is really where it all starts for us. It's all about being more in touch with the things that we're experiencing and sharing them openly. I think that key idea of beginning with a conversation with your colleagues about what will help them to share, what is a safe space within your organization. And you can have that as a conversation. You can also just observe it for yourself. Where is it that people are speaking up most and sharing the things that they wouldn't dare to share otherwise? Is it over lunch? Is it over drinks? Just try and see how that happens. So observe, reflect, and let yourself ask questions and demonstrate leadership, really, by asking questions to help the whole organization move in this direction.
Great, thanks for your answer, Anna. I think that is it for today. I want to finish it up. I want to re-quote what you've said. A good question for everybody to think of: what is a safe space within your organization to think and reflect? I think that's really important in organizations to be able to adapt any innovation. For now, thank you, Anna, for your session. It was really great. I very much enjoyed it. And for all the viewers, I want to note you on some other sessions that we have coming up today. We have Disruptive Design from Istanbul, where Tuxe will explain us all about disruptive design and how it's taking place in Istanbul. Next to that, we have Ariana Mazzeo, who will explain us all about redesigning relationships, community co-production, and new places for democracy. If you want to look back any sessions you have missed, all sessions that have already been live can be catched up on our website, thinkdiff.co. And that's it for now. Thank you, Anna, and goodbye.
Thank you.